So, welcome to the Gen Z Marketer Podcast, where we have marketing conversations and everything in between. Here we talk about marketing, branding, e commerce, and the power of integrated marketing communication. I'm your host, Jamia Umali, a strategist passionate and specializing in branding and marketing for e commerce. Our guest for today's episode is actually a designer that I worked with before. We worked in a branding agency, a branding e commerce agency. And rather than walking you through in his, with his experience, I'd rather let him introduce himself. So, everyone, let's welcome Angelo San Buenaventura. Hi, Jello. How are you?
Hi, Jamie. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have you here in
Thank
the
you. Thank
show.
you.
It's something that
Finally.
we've always talked about, and now you're
Yeah,
finally here.
finally, yes.
Yeah. So
After a few months.
why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, so my background is graphic design, but I'm more of a everywhere kind of guy. So actually, my Instagram profile reads as a five-star generalist because that's because I have a lot of interest spanning from marketing to copywriting to graphic design and gaming and among other things. So um, I'm a multi-passionate individual as a designer.
Right. Yeah, I find that interesting because I've always known you as someone who's very versatile. But
Yeah,
of course, before you started or you got into your career, like, I'm curious to know what made you pursue a career as a designer. I think I remember your course in college was, is it
graphic
multimedia?
design. Yeah,
Oh, graphic
MMA, graphic
design. Yeah.
design.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a split moment decision. Because originally I wanted to become an architect. So I applied to different schools. I got in. Hindi maganda yung results ng exam ko. So I got in uh, within the top 300 students sa exam. So I was ready to become an architect. Before that, I wanted to pursue engineering because mostly I just love to create stuff. But last minute, nung interview ko sa dean sa Lasal Dasma, tinanong lang ako, parang sobrang casual lang. Sabi sa akin, sure ka na ba? Tapos,
Oh.
uh, napaisip ako doon. Kasi parang wala nagtanong sa akin yun before, sure ka na ba? So, stunned ako, shoot ako. I was not prepared for the question. Kasi
Yeah.
I was already, yung utak ko nasa next week na yun, next week pasukan na. So, ang utak ko, architect na ako, architecture na ako. Last minute, tinanong ako, sure ka na ba? So, napaisip ako, is this really what I want? Architecture ka na. Honestly, medyo na-pressure ako. Natakot ako because I think architecture for me before was or parang any kind of responsibility na gano'n, parang feeling ko hindi ko kaya. So, in my mind, ano yung sunod na madali? ano yung, ano yung parang,
Okay.
saan
You,
pa
you
ako
were
pumasa?
intimidated.
Yeah,
Intimidated
oo,
by
sobrang
architecture,
intimidated ako.
yeah.
Yeah, kasi parang I thought na, maraming math. There's gonna be a lot
Yeah.
of math involved. So parang
Yes,
ayoko.
that's true.
I wanna deal with that. Pero, hindi naman ako, I'm pretty capable. I'm very capable in math. Pero I felt like at the time na intimidated. So I looked at my application form again, and then I saw it was between journalism and graphic design. So I thought graphic design would be better choice kasi parang I would still have to create things, pero I'm not bound by mga technical mathematic rules. So parang okay,
Yeah.
sige, let's go with graphic design. Since mahilig din ako mag-drawing.
Right. Right.
Yeah, parang dun ko siya na-discover kung ano ba talaga siya without really
Okay.
knowing what I wanted.
Right. Right. I like that you mentioned that your story about how
Uh-huh.
you got into it because you were avoiding math. I mean, that's the reason why I was also in com.
Yeah, but
I
yeah,
mean for
it's one of the common reasons.
yeah.
The top five reasons in it. Okay.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, I think I don't know if I ever told you this, but there are people close to me who know that as early as grade school, I already knew I wanted to be in com. because
Mhm.
I wanted to be in publishing.
Oh,
So
okay.
so yeah, because I really wanted to be a writer. I really
Mhm.
that was the goal. That was the reason why I wanted to take a com. And then when I got into com, of course, when you say com, a lot of people would think it's broadcasting or it's journalism. But in reality, there's so much elements into it, no? Like marketing, branding, advertising, PR,
Yeah.
theater, so on and so forth. So it was where I also thrived as well. I also thrived in com because of all the outlets, no, creative outlets,
Mm.
but more on the communication side of things, which I genuinely enjoy because it's all about writing and speaking. And there was
Yes.
less math.
Yeah, yeah.
There was
Oh,
no
no.
math.
It's
Like
more of ideas talaga.
yeah, my math was until statistics. I only had
Mhm.
two math subjects, and then it was mostly production classes for com. And
Mhm.
that's what I enjoyed, no? The exams, you don't really have to like, review hard for written exams, multiple choice or what. Your exams are usually production work, like marketing pitch, advertising
Oh.
pitch, so on
Mhm.
and so forth, right? So I can relate to you on that sense. So
But
so I'm curious kasi of course you already shared about how you were into like having creative work, right? Or like drawing then. So how
oh,
do you like continue to master your craft?
um, siguro I would say uh, there's two sides to it. There's the technical and there's the mental aspect of it. So the technical aspect is I try to keep updated with the software. So because right now we've been trained with Adobe software kasi. But lately I've been getting on into Figma and AI and other stuff. And that's the technical aspect. So the mental aspect is uh, I would consume a lot of media. I would consume different kinds of content just so I could have fuel for my creativity and my imagination. So there's two aspects. Number one is keep watching things, keep consuming content. Parang may dahilan ka mag-TikTok madalas, no? Hindi. Or Netflix. Pero it's true. So you have to keep yourself updated with content, with ideas talaga. And then number two is software because you have to learn how to execute those ideas. So yeah.
Okay, right. Anyway, since you mentioned that of course there are different, I guess, technical tools coming in. Like you mentioned Figma. I think that's one of the things that are up and coming, or I think more common lately. I've been encountering different work situations where Figma is a thing. So I'm curious to know your perspective as a designer. How does like using Figma streamline the creative process?
Well, I think one of the core benefits of Figma is online collaboration. So when working within teams, it's easier to have an online platform where you can create that has like the most basic capabilities of creating marketing collaterals and some graphic design work. It's easier than carrying around hard drives or uploading files.
Right.
And may mga technical aspects kasi not everyone has very powerful laptops. Yung iba meron lang basic na laptop. So I think Figma helps uh, bridge the gap between high-end PC users and some casual users na makapag-collaborate to create something for their team or for their company.
Right. I like that you mentioned that. And to add, I think what I appreciate about Figma is that even though you're not a designer, like it's very intuitive to use and it's easy to collaborate,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, oh yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask randomly because we both work in branding and marketing, right? Marketing, especially in the e-commerce side of things. I'm curious to know which side or like what it's like for you to design for like branding versus marketing, and if there is any preference for you, which would you rather do?
Mhm. Okay. Um, so difference between branding and marketing work kasi is um, when you say branding kasi, well, what most people commonly call as branding. It's usually visual identity. So it's usually done at the start. So that's your starting point, or like what, maybe step 3 or 4. And then marketing is something that you do consistently, like it's your maintenance. Eh. I had no. Siguro if I were to choose one, I would be choosing branding. Siyempre, bukod sa nandun ako, I think I think it's challenging and fun to keep creating something new from scratch, or to improve on something that could go to greater heights, or like parang makeover. So it's more engaging for me personally. Um, Although designing for marketing is fun then, because you get to practice consistency. So it has its own benefits. But I prefer branding more than the marketing part.
Right. I actually have to side with you on this one. I mean, I know the podcast is called the Gen Z Marketer, and and actually, yeah, I am a marketing person, but more so recently, I'm more of an IMC person. And the fact is, I agree with you 100% on the difference of branding and marketing. And actually, for people who have listened to the episodes previously, um, you would hear that I reiterated those points again and again. The difference between branding and marketing, how essentially you can't do any sort of marketing, advertising, PR, and so on and so forth without branding. Because, like you said, branding is the starting point. You cannot really do anything without branding, because
Yeah.
branding is where you set the strategy, right? The
Branding is your
identity.
core. Oh.
Yeah, visual cues. You and I know this because we've been
Yeah.
working on the branding decks for how many like years. So, essentially, it's where before you run, you have to learn how to walk, and that's how you do it in branding. And
Mm.
also, I agree with you. Like that's also my sentiment as to why I prefer branding. Um, just to add, I don't know if I ever told you this. I think I mentioned this in some episodes before, but one of my pet peeves in marketing, because of course, throughout my career, I was really exposed to marketing roles for different brands, e-commerce, I guess agencies or clients. And one pet peeve of mine is that there were a lot of brands I worked with that had no brand Bible. They had no brand guide. That was a
Mm.
very, very huge frustration for me, because the problem is it's not just like documentation per se. But the thing is, when you don't have something like that set in stone, people would have different perceptions on what your brand is, especially internally in the company and externally. You don't really have like a compass
Yeah,
essentially on what
consistency.
the brand exactly. So that was a huge frustration for me, because everyone's going based on instinct, and there's nothing wrong with going with instinct, but that instinct has to have like a basis, or where is it coming from? Is it your personal preference? Is it your gut feel? Or are those like preferences and gut feel anchored to who the brand really is?
Okay. Good
Diba?
insight yan, ah.
Diba? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no problem with having like a marketing instinct or even branding instinct based on
Mm.
what you think, who you think the target audience is, or what the marketing trends are. But the fact is, you have to go back to branding no matter what. And I think in one of the branding episodes that I had, one thing that we already always emphasize there in the podcast for people who are always listening, one of the things I always emphasize is that branding is really where you set your purpose. You can change your, I guess, values, your mission, vision, your identity. You could revamp it, right, Jello? When rebranding happens, when there's a change in the market, if there's a change in the I guess product, services, identity, you can change your visual cues, but one thing that doesn't really change is your purpose.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I agree.
right, diba?
Uh,
So but for the record, I'm still a marketing person.
market,
This is still a
marketing,
Gen
but
Z marketer podcast. It's not the Gen Z branding person. I
brand,
mean, at the
ano,
end of the day,
brander.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and marketing is, yeah, marketing, works really well. Your advertising, all of those like IMC elements works really well because of branding.
Yeah, I agree. I
And
agree.
yeah, and without branding, your messaging or even your identity, your visual cues, if you don't have that set in stone, the campaigns you'd come up with for marketing, advertising, it can be different across the board and there won't be consistency. And I like what you said about how marketing is really all about consistency of messaging. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, ultimately, if you don't have the branding like message set in stone, then
But
it,
yeah,
it can
if you don't know what you're trying to say, diba?
it's gonna be all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, now that earlier we were talking about like some of the technical, I guess, tools that you're using as a designer, and I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the upcoming or even current trends right now is AI, right? And
Yes.
basically, you already talked about earlier like the evolution of technology. Like, of course, before it was Adobe. And then there's
Uh-huh.
Figma, even there's Canva right now for like
Uh-huh, yeah.
drag and drop, like low barrier for designs, right?
Yeah,
Essentially
low barrier
Canva
for
is like for
entry.
yeah, exactly. So how has that evolution of technology, all of these new tools, all of these new platforms, how has it changed the way you work as a designer?
Um, I would say mostly in at the fundamental sense, it didn't really change much because whatever software that you use, so if you use Canva, if you use Figma, if you use Illustrator, if you use Photoshop, or if you use Corel, or if you use Photopea or whatever, what's not gonna change is your work process, is your thinking, is your imagination, it's your concept creation. So, but the new softwares like Canva and Figma, they offer a lot of collaboration features. So I guess the one thing that I would say that changed in my workflow is how involved other people are in my creative process. Because when you started to work with Illustrator or Photoshop, so it has a relatively high barrier for entry. Whereas Figma and Canva, basically anyone with an internet connection can access it. So you can it's easier to get feedback. It's easier to get others' input for your work or like hear the comments or revisions when you're working, especially if you're working with a team. And that's I think that's yeah that's one thing that changed a lot in my workflow with Figma and Canva.
I like that you mentioned that. And if I were to add one thing is I think essentially I'd leave it with this quote that a great calligrapher doesn't need to choose their pens.
Yeah, I
So
like it.
yeah, right, yeah, right. So essentially, if you're a designer or someone's getting into design, regardless of what platform or what tool you use, it's
Mm.
really a matter of what you do with the tools that you have,
Yeah,
right?
tools change, but
Yeah, exactly.
but you're you. There's
Yeah,
only one
yeah,
you. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and it's about instinct. It's about understanding, I guess. Yeah, the brand because if you're doing something for a brand, like how do you execute that? It's really all about the I guess you as a person, like we're saying, no.
Yeah.
But Jello, I have a random question because I think this is one of the I guess somewhat ongoing debates in the industry, no?
Mm-hmm.
Whether platforms like Canva or like, I'm sure if you've been hearing those kinds of debates now, is Canva a good thing for the industry or yun nga, because it's low barrier of entry, a lot of people are getting into it
Uh
and
huh.
using it to like design, I guess, marketing or social media posts, and then it's not really up to par with design standards.
Mm-hmm.
Like essentially, what is your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that when it comes to that like discussion?
Okay. Um. Yeah. Yeah. Medyo controversial nga siya, but my opinion is that I think it's a good thing for the industry because I think about it this way. If you think about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, when there was no Adobe, there was no Photoshop yet. The advertising industry has it's very no like it has a much higher barrier for entry. So to become an art director, you have to know how to paint. No? So you have to know how to draw. If you work in production, if you work in advertising, the workflow is much harder because I have relatives who work in the advertising industry as early as the 70s. So I've heard stories of how there was a different company for each individual work. So like there was a diff- there was a separate entity for editing. There was a separate entity for recording. So it has a lot of steps. It and has a relatively high barrier for entry. No, like it's medyo ano siya gate kept. Ganun. But over time, that as new softwares get released, as new workflows become added. So like the existence of Photoshop, no, it allowed people who are not well connected in any industry to produce works uh, that would rival the quality of, sometimes even top the quality of what the current industry was doing at the time. So it made, kasi maraming creative eh. There are a lot of creative people out there, but they have no, wala silang means before. So what these things do is they empower people who have ideas, people who have talent. Uh, they empower these people to become more visible in the landscape. So same as before, no? Before when you have para ka makapag-record, para ka makapag-release ng kanta, diba? It's so hard. So you need to be in a record label or basta marami siyang maraming steps. But now as technology becomes accessible, it empowers a lot of indie artists in creating. Actually, iba nakakapag self-release, diba? So
Right.
it empowers people who have ideas. It empowers a lot of creative people. It empowers people who have no means. So parang I think the good thing about softwares or things like these is they filter out people who have yun talaga may idea, yun talaga may creativity, talaga may talent. Because when everybody can work on the software that you're using, ang magkakatalo dyan is yung creativity mo, is yung concept mo. So I think it's a good thing kasi it challenges us din eh,
Right.
mga creatives eh.
Right. That's true. And essentially, no, if we look at it in a perspective, it's really democratizing design. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
oo,
not
oo.
necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's what the internet is for. It democratizes a lot of things. I mean, right
Yeah.
now, being a content creator, before it was really media, no, it was really these big networks, and now
Yeah,
everyone
you
is a
need to be on
creator.
TV eh before ngayon. Yeah.
Exactly. Everyone and anyone has a phone who can just
Yeah,
record.
you can.
There are pros and cons, but at least in this context, like what you were saying about like design or Canva, I have to agree with you on that. It democratizes design. It makes collaboration way easier. It's a
Mm,
starting point for anyone who wants to evolve as a designer and
yeah.
doesn't really have the means because of course the more sophisticated softwares like Adobe are it's an investment. You need to have
Mm,
like certain resources for that. And I think I actually use Canva a lot, at least for the podcast. And it's been really helpful, honestly. As long as you of course I am not a designer, so I usually consult with designers like Jello, some of the friends I know when it comes to especially, fine tuning the visuals of the podcast. So some of you who may stalk the Instagram or the previous cover photos, you would see that there has been an evolution since the first few posts that I had. Right now, it's more branded. So anyway, since we're talking about tools and technology, one of really the emerging or current trends right now is AI, right? So Jello, I would like to ask you, because I know you've been playing around with this.
mm.
So what has it been like to use AI for design so far?
Um, it's great. It's great. Uh, it, ano eh, it's like taking a shortcut, but not in a bad way. Because what I use AI for is essentially eliminating some steps in creating content. But lately I've been using it for photo restoration. So that's something that used to take weeks, sometimes months in creating. But now I can restore a photo in 2 hour 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours, and in good quality. And sometimes I use AI to generate some just to make minor improvements in my work. So it beats looking for stock images for something that would take you 2 to 3 hours before. Maybe I would
Right.
spend 30 minutes on it just to fine tune what I needed to add to an image. So it helps me in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes AI images can look a little bit like, too fabricated, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. It's one of the problems of early AI. But now there are different AI models out there that do further improvements on images. So it's getting easier by the day. Just have to it's there's a learning curve. So
Right.
that's what I'm trying to learn right now.
Right. So essentially, there are a lot of applications, right? Like what are like photo restoration or
Mhm.
generating
Yeah.
stock images that you've been
Yes.
using with AI. So yeah,
Yes.
other than the fact that sometimes it looks a little bit off, what are some of the cons you think when it comes to like using AI for design?
For design, um there's a lot of privacy issues that could arise from that. Um, AI is a very powerful tool if used correctly. So what happens when you have a very powerful tool in a wild west situation? So you get a lot of problems ethically and
Yeah.
legally. So I think
Right.
those are the main problems that I think the heaviest problems of AI right now are those things.
Right. And because it's practically new. It's not totally new, but it's practically new. The
Mhm.
idea is when something new is, here, everyone's really like, there's a learning curve. Everyone's trying to adapt. And it's kind of like how social media started, right? When social media
Mhm.
started, everyone was into it, everyone was excited. And then eventually in the long run, that's when they started to see like ethical
Yeah,
implications. Like,
oh, that's what, oh,
as soon as it evolved, more features were added.
problems were arising.
Yeah,
Yeah, you start.
exactly.
Tama, tama. Yes.
So but essentially, since you so far you see it as more of like a support, right? Like a way to improve workflows and a way to make make the whole process easier.
Yes. It helps a lot in streamlining the work, and it cuts a lot of time in the work that I do, and it even it's done something that would almost be impossible uh, for designers like me a few years ago, especially when it comes to improving the quality of images, because that's one of the things that used to take a lot of hours when working with something. It's improving current images or like producing high quality visuals. So that's something that became easier with AI, and I appreciate that its effects on my work.
Right. I would have to agree with you on that because AI is starting to become more apparent in a lot of platforms,
Yeah.
not just design platforms, but creator platforms in general. Like Canva has its own AI that has been really helpful. And
Mm.
even this platform that we are using to record the podcast, Riverside, I actually just started using this quite recently because it's fairly new. And so far, I generally enjoy using Riverside as well. For context, for people who are listening, Riverside is the podcast recording platform that we are using. It actually has both audio and video recording. You can do live streams with it. You can add your scripts into it. And what I like about this is once you start editing the podcast, you actually automatically get a transcript. Like essentially, Jello, after this whole recording, I automatically have a transcript and I can just like, click certain phrases, backspace it automatically. I'm editing the audio recording. Like that's
See,
how simple it is. That's
that,
how
It cuts
easy
your
it is.
workflow in half.
Exactly, exactly. That's why I've been really, I really love using this platform right now because it's making podcast recording much simpler. And the thing is, before when you say audio recording, of course, normally you would have like what Audacity. You would have these outside software or platforms, and then with podcasting specifically, years ago, a couple years ago, when I started the podcast, it was Anchor FM. Same principle. You automatically record the podcast. You just cut it using the typical how you edit audio, right, with Audacity and other tools. But this
Yes.
one with its AI support, it's just like way more convenient. It's really democratizing content creation and being a designer for everyone. But
Mm-hmm.
Jel, I'm curious to know for at least the design side of things, like or this AI aided design platforms. Would you say it's low barrier of entry? Would you say that it's easy to access or play with for people who don't really have, I guess, technical abilities? Or would you say that using AI for design is much more for like experienced or sophisticated users?
Um, I would say yes and no. Uh, when it comes to barrier, kasi, so yes, it's a low barrier for entry because anyone with a decent internet connection can get into it, can get started into it. But also no, because although, kasi you hear this a lot, eh. The
Right.
create For a lot of designers, they are worried. Oh, AI is gonna take a lot of jobs away from us. But when it comes to generative AI, kasi, um, there's still a skill required there. Because AI as A- AI is still a tool. It's just a tool, although a very powerful one. It's it still requires a certain level of competence to operate. Because when you're giving it prompts, for example, you have to know particular styles. You have to be very descriptive in what you do. And not a lot of even if to say na parang AI is very accessible, not everyone can be as descriptive
Right.
as ano eh.
Right.
Parang sabi AI will take our jobs. Okay, but a lot of people who have access to AI don't really have the capacity to hindi nila ma-describe yung gusto nila. So
Yes.
it's still gonna be a matter of taste. Like if you're a matter of taste, a matter of uh, knowledge, because you have
Yeah.
to be able to operate an AI software, you have to be well versed in the different art styles out there, in the different works of different people, for you to give it something to generate. Because your AI, kasi you're feeding you're feeding the model, you're feeding the machine. So I like to think of it as GIGO. So it's a principle where it means garbage in, garbage out. So if you feed it garbage, it's gonna churn out garbage. So
Right. Right.
yeah, so I think yes and no. To summarize lang my point, yes and no. Yes, it lowers the barrier of entry because everyone can still access AI, but no, because it still requires a certain level of competency, certain level of responsibility, certain level of taste to be able to work with such a powerful tool. So yeah.
Right. Essentially, having the technical and analytical ability to actually discern whether what AI generates makes sense, right? I really have to
Yes.
agree with you on that one
Yes.
because not just for design, AI for design, right? You also have AI for copywriting. Like you have Chat GPT, you have
ChatGPT,
Notions AI, you have Bard or
Grammarly.
Gemini now for Google. And one thing I noticed is, yeah, there are people who, rely in with these tools to do their homework, right?
Mhm.
And the problem is it all turns out the same thing
Yeah, oh,
based
yes.
on existing data, right? And it's not necessarily one like, fine tuned to you. Another thing is um you're not able to discern the human element, or you're not able
Correct.
to see whether like it makes sense. Like for instance, for copywriting specifically, I did toy with it a bit, and I did notice how, yeah, it lacked the human element. It wasn't even branded. Yeah, because
Yeah,
if you're writing for
walang
marketing
tone.
as well, it has to be on brand. And
Walang tone.
another thing is, I know, I think you know this about me when I'm doing branding work. I don't like using jargon words too much
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
general because it makes it a little bit intimidating and impersonal. So
Mhm.
with AI for writing, that's very, very common. I mean, there's this joke, right? When it's chat GPT, it's all about tapestry. Like, you'll always see tapestry there. So essentially, there are some writers I know who use, these tools to like support, yeah, like you said, like aid them when it comes to writing. But as someone who of course started writing even before AI is a thing, it really lacks that, I guess more discernment when it comes
Mhm.
to how you write it, fine tuning the tone and things like that.
That's the danger kasi parang when you rely too much on generated AI kasi you get generic stuff. So in the end, it will still fall. It will still depend on your creativity or your concept. But AI should not be looked at as a full alternative. Parang it's just a tool that enables people who are already creative to create something more, to create something even bigger at a faster rate. Diba? So parang it's the same logic as Photoshop. Anyone with a decent computer can get Photoshop or Illustrator, but but you still see like not very good visual work out there. Not
Right.
you, s- Even if a lot of people can access Photoshop and Illustrator, you still see bad design everywhere. So it's just parang I think we are on another like it's another era for tools.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So essentially, earlier we said that a great calligrapher doesn't need to choose their pens.
Yeah,
And at
babalik
the
tayo
same
dun.
time, it's really up to you how you use your pens, right? What you
Yeah,
do
I
with it.
agree. I agree. Yes.
Diba? Okay. So essentially, since we're talking about like AI and its implications, how do you think would this impact design work in the future?
Okay. I I I feel like that since kasi with generative AI you're gonna have to learn to express yourself even better. So I think moving forward this would be a great opportunity for people, for young designers, for students out there to start expanding their vocabulary. So that's the first thing. Number two is getting familiar with different or different things, different works, arts, literature, songs. Like read up. People are gonna have to start reading up on things. Like they're gonna have to read a lot of books. They're gonna have to watch a lot of film. They're gonna have to listen to a lot of songs. It's like training their own mind so they can become more descriptive in the future. Because I think in the future AI will get more advanced, but you're still gonna have to learn how to um how to tell it what how to tell AI what you want. So I think it will focus more on people getting to develop their taste first. Yeah.
Right. Right. I think it's more on having also developing your stock knowledge, right, or your field of
Oh, right.
experience
It's
in
expanding
terms
your
of,
mind
yeah,
library. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. It's more of like, yeah, you can ask AI to give you prompts or to suggest things, but ultimately it's up to what you do with it or how you're gonna take that and make it your own. Because the reality is, if you're typing in that prompt, probably another person is typing in that same thing.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's not very far. That's not very far from happening. It's very,
exactly, right? So the thing is, AI is, yeah, like you said, is a tool. It's meant to help you streamline things and make things easier, but it's up to what you do with it, for you to really create something that's more you. How you can own your work, right? I think it's
yeah,
all about
correct.
owning your work as well.
It's gonna be a lot of personal branding. It's gonna be a lot of focus on personal branding in the future, blah. But then yeah, because as we get connected, parang it's harder to stand out unless you have a very distinct personal brand. So I think that's gonna be one of the things that are gonna be in focus in 5 to 10 years from now.
Right. And I think since we're getting to that, I like that we're talking about this because this is one of the things that we always talk about when we're doing the branding work is that whether a brand wants to be a trendsetter or a trend follower. When you're a trendsetter, you're ahead. You're always ahead of your competitors or the market trends. When trend followers, these are brands or people who just follows what's up and coming. So in terms of being a designer or in terms of like using AI as a designer, how can you continue to be or how can you be a trendsetter or be on top of what's up and coming rather than just following the trend?
Oh, medyo mahirap na tanong yan. Because I'm not a trendsetter myself, but I think one of the things that you need to do kasi with AI is you have to develop your insight. So insight can be developed from exposure to an industry. So insight will be developed through experience in different industries as well. So that can like give you a mental roadmap of what's about to come. And kasi when it comes to trends, ano yun, I believe it's more of trial and error.
Right.
Kasi there are people who try to start a thing but it did not become a thing. Yung mga nag-try ng pauso pero hindi naman sumikat. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there are accidental events who happen to become very so viral, and it became a trend. But I guess with AI, it can help. You can use AI to help you gauge what gauge like the current landscape that you're working on. But in the end, it's all gonna be you. Because AI is always relying on the existing things. AI is always developing from a data set. So data set comes from the things that already exist. So to become a trendsetter, it's gonna be babalik ako doon sa sinabi ko kanina. It's gonna be all about you. It's gonna be all about how you're gonna differentiate yourself. It's gonna be about your unique vision for the future for your industry. So AI, I don't think AI can generate. I don't think AI can see the future. In the end, it's all gonna be you.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I think that's one thing that we have been reiterating even early on. It's really about you developing your field of experience and honing your skills because learning doesn't really stop even after you graduate. I think this is one thing that I also did in my career as well. I really like being exposed to different roles, different industries because even though like we said there are different fans or different skill sets. You
Mhm.
develop your skill set by being exposed to different
Yeah,
things and your
it's true.
adaptability gets better because of that.
Yeah,
Like
it's
that's
true.
one thing.
Oh.
Especially in marketing, of course, as a marketer, I have the skill sets, right? But because I was exposed to different things, different roles, different setups, I'm more adaptable compared
Mhm.
to, I guess how it was before. And yeah, I think that's what we're getting at here. That if you want to continue being on top of the trend or in general, being able to adapt to new things, you really have to, because we're operating the assumption we all have the skills. It's a
Uh-huh.
matter of honing those skills, improving your skill sets, and being exposed to different things, learning different things so that you're adaptable to whatever comes your
Mm.
way.
You have to be a five-star generalist
Yes.
like me.
And that's your brand story,
Yeah, that's my
slogan.
brand story. I'm a five-star generalist.
Yeah. Yeah. Sa akin naman, it's creative strategist, ganon. Anyway, what are some of the like emerging or returning design trends right now that you think creatives should look out for, or what are some of these design trends that you like or don't like?
Um, well, mahabang kwento. Pero, it, kasi for a time, in the recent 5 years or so, people have been focused on minimalism. You hear it quite a lot to the point
Yeah.
na it hurts your ears.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
hearing, minimalist, minimalist. And I think minimalism has removed a lot of personality from a lot of things, and um, it makes a lot of things dull because minimalism, when used in the right way, um exudes a very specific kind of personality. But when everybody uses it, when it's become oversaturated, everything becomes minimalist. It removes a lot of personality. It makes things bland. So over time, I think society will try to like go back to the maximalist, or like to a lot of expressive design.
Right.
So it's gonna I think we're gonna see a very interesting 5 years in graphic design. Is there I think I feel like it uh more of like how would I say this, my personality,
Right.
my personality ang mga works na magka-come out in the next few years. And it's not gonna care too much about it's gonna break a lot of rules.
Right.
Kasi parang the recent years have become ano uptight eh. It's too uptight
Yeah.
na
Yeah.
kailangan may ganito, kailangan may ganyan. Kailangan may mga measurements kasi minsan. But I think people are gonna have to want are wanting to have a refresh, in the sense na parang okay, I want to create work with more personality, with more na parang hindi siya pang I think we're gonna start to see the death of pang feed na yung
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
mga aesthetic na ano, the word aesthetic. So it's gonna change a lot in the coming years. Mas magkakaroon ng spontaneity ng personality, even if it doesn't quote unquote look aesthetic. So we're gonna see a return of those kind of things, I believe.
Right. I have to agree with you on that, Jello. And I think another perspective, or like the strategist side of me, one thing that I would like to reiterate is, again, this is all going back to branding.
Mhm.
Visual cues, like, at least the way we work now, when you come up with the stylescapes or the visual identity, you base it on the identity or the strategic identity that, kumbaga ako muna bago ikaw, di ba? Yung
Yeah.
workflow natin. And the thing is, are what 'di ba, what you're designing is usually based on what I come up with. And
Yes.
and the fact is, when you come up with these designs, of course there's different approaches, and of course there are clients, I agree with you, that always say minimalism. The
Yeah.
question is, does that meet the personality, like you were saying, the personality or the identity of the brand? Because when you say minimalist, that yeah, at the end of the day, does that really relate to your brand? Let's say if you're supposed to be a fun brand, does
Mhm.
minimalism make sense? Or do you just want a clean design? I think like
Yeah.
there's also a difference, right? Being clean versus minimalism. I
Minimal,
would
yeah.
say that, yeah, right? There's a difference between those two as
The
well.
word minimalism gets thrown around a lot eh.
Yeah.
But not a lot of people understand what it means. Parang they just like to use the word minimalism. Okay, minimalist ganun ganun. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, because it's
it,
the trend, right? Quote
yeah,
unquote.
oh. So those people are the same people na mention ko kanina who need to learn how to describe what they want. Sila-
Yes. I mean, Jella, we work in that industry in which
yeah.
people don't know what they want. And it's up to us to translate that. But the thing is, yeah, since we're discussing this, I do feel like there is some people who say, yeah, they like minimalism, but I think, do you really want that? Or do you want clean designs? Do you
Mhm.
want, something that's,
Mhm.
diba? I feel
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
it's ano a misconception eh. Like it's being
Mhm.
misconstrued. It's being used either way. Like when people say minimalism, it could also mean they just want something clean.
Yeah. To add din pala, it's one of the core it's one of the most important things that we can do as designers and as strategists, na we need to learn how to extract um, the ideas from the client eh. So kasi parang it goes na ano, there are a lot of clients, there are a lot of people who don't know how to express themselves, who don't know what they want, but they just feel it, 'di ba? May
Yeah.
mga clients na ganun eh. I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
So so it's a very important it's very important for us designers and strategists as well to be able to extract that knowledge or extract that idea from the client, because if parang ganun, it's one of the things that's gonna separate us from the market eh. It's how well you It's how well you interpret. It's how well you
Yeah.
get. It's how well you design your solution in such a way that the client will say, "Okay, Jamie gets me. Jamie understands me." Not a lot of uh, designers or create and strategists can do that. So it's one thing that also uh, we need to keep improving as well.
Right. Essentially, we have to work with clients who either don't know what they want or, have an idea what they want, but it's all over the place.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah,
it's
I
our
mean,
job to streamline kasi
exactly.
we're not just parang we're not parang in a way may pagka-therapist.
Yeah,
May pagka-therapist
exactly.
tayo. Oo.
Yeah. And, we had that experience that talagang we were like a therapist.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A
We
lot
had
of
to
times, yes.
translate those, a lot of translation. Being a strategist actually requires a lot of translation, not necessarily meaning in terms of language, but in terms of like work in general. Yeah.
Thought,
You would
yes.
know this. I'm always the translator.
Yeah, oh, it's
Yeah.
hard. You have
Yeah.
to keep,
Hmm.
but it's fun.
Yeah. So anyway, since we're
Challenge.
talking about this and since we are more of branding people, no, I guess what is your advice for any, I guess, designer who wants to pursue a career in, the design industry, specifically branding?
Okay, for anyone in the creative field, I would say, um, it's a lot easier to learn software. So I won't suggest siguro I wouldn't focus too much on the software. I would focus myself on learning, on expanding my mind because it's one of the hard things to it's one of the harder things to do. So I would develop taste first. Um, I would start gathering things that I would start to formulate, like to gather inspirations just to form your personal identity. So bubuo ka ng mental library mo ng mga great ideas. You would start like your film collection, film list mo. You would save siguro you would save works that you like. You'd save graphics or commercials that you find interesting. And I would just build up that mental library until mag-mature siya. And syempre yung software natutunan mo rin yan along the way, eh. But I would focus more on the mental aspect of it.
Right.
Kasi it's so much harder. It gets it gets exponentially harder as you get older. Parang
Yes.
it's compounding. So
Mm-hmm.
as you get older, it becomes harder and harder to learn to influence. So you have to keep your brain alive. Ganun.
Yes, exactly. I would have to agree with you on that. I actually want to add. I think one common thing that we have, Jello, is that we're lifelong learners. Eh? We're
Yeah.
people who genuinely just like to learn new things. And one thing that I always appreciated about you is that even though you're not really a strategist, you're always curious to know how we work or how I work, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's one thing also, no, as a designer and even as a strategist, you always have to have that awareness or understanding of how, like, for design, how does strategy work, or for strategists, how does design work? Because
Mhm.
strategy at the end of the day is better if it's creative strategy, and
Yes.
design is it works if it's intentional, if there's like a story behind it. I think it goes both ways. No, it's hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other.
I agree.
So yeah, it was really nice to have you, Jello. Before we
Thank
wrap
you.
up, why don't you take the time to talk about your wine business?
Okay, so for the listeners, we have a family business. We sell wine from local wine. So we sell local wine. It's called Jose Antonio. So you can search us on Instagram, Jose Antonio Wines. We're on Facebook as well. So we make Bugnay wines from Ilocos Sur. And yan, so far naman maganda yung comments ng mga tao.
Okay.
Maganda ano naman. So I suggest I suggest that you that you try our wine because there's an opportunity. The Philippines is not a wine country, but there there have there has been an increase in the consumption of wine, especially with millennials and Gen Z. So it's
Right.
an opportunity to get on the that thing. So
Right.
especially local wine, diba? Kasi we have a lot of good wines here eh, na
Mm-hmm.
ano, medyo unnoticed pa. So
Yeah.
we're doing that, do that highlight for
Right.
for
Yeah.
that.
Okay. And also, I think you can, in case of, for the people who are listening who are looking for freelancers, Jello is also accepting design work. And if you need strategy work, I'm here. We're a package deal. The joke.
Yeah. Tsaka mga ano, pag kailangan niyo na singer, dancer,
TikTokeries, ganyan. Ano na
TikToker.
kami. Proven, ano na, teamwork. Anyway, once again, Jello, thank you for your time. If you
Thank you,
enjoyed
thank
this
you.
discussion, make sure to follow our podcast to get notified on the latest uploads. Share your thoughts, suggest topics, or collaborate with me at the Gen Z Marketer Podcast on Facebook and at Gen Z MKT on Instagram.